To enable Azure SQL Managed Identity, you first need to understand what Managed Identity is. Managed Identity is a feature in Azure that allows you to authenticate to Azure services without needing to manage credentials. The first step is to create an Azure SQL database. If you already have one, you can proceed to the next step. To create a new database, go to the Azure portal and navigate to the SQL Databases section. Fill in the required information, such as database name, subscription, and resource group, and click Create. Once your database is created, navigate to the Azure Active Directory section in the Azure portal. Here, you will register your Azure SQL database as a managed identity. This will create a service principal in Azure Active Directory that represents your database. After registering your database, you need to enable the managed identity. To do this, go back to your database in the Azure portal and click on the Managed Identity option. Toggle the switch to enable the managed identity. Next, you need to grant your managed identity the necessary permissions to access other Azure resources. This can be done by going to the Azure resource you want to access, such as a storage account or Key Vault, and adding the managed identity as a role assignment. It is also important to note that you need to update your application to use the managed identity. This typically involves installing the necessary libraries and configuring your application to use the managed identity for authentication. Best practices for using managed identity include using least privilege access, where your managed identity only has the permissions it needs to function, and regularly reviewing and updating your role assignments. In summary, enabling Azure SQL Managed Identity involves creating an Azure SQL database, registering it as a managed identity in Azure Active Directory, enabling the managed identity, granting necessary permissions, and updating your application to use the managed identity. By following these steps and best practices, you can securely authenticate to Azure services without managing credentials.